The Greek Way to Western Civilization by Edith Hamilton, Chapter 16. The Way of the Greeks. Character is a Greek word, but it did not mean to the Greeks what it means to us. To them it stood first for the mark stamped upon the coin, and then for the impress of this or that quality upon a man. As Euripides speaks of the stamp, character, of valor upon Hercules, man the coin, valor the mark imprinted on him. To us, a man's character is that which is peculiarly his own. It distinguishes each one from the rest. To the Greeks, it was a man's share in qualities all men partake of. It united each one to the rest. We were interested in people's special characteristics, the things in this or that person which are different from the general. The Greeks, on the contrary, thought what was important in a man were precisely the qualities he shared with all mankind. The distinction is a vital one. Our way is to consider each separate thing alone by itself. The Greeks always saw things as parts of a whole, and this habit of mind is stamped upon everything they did. It is the underlying cause of the difference between their arts and ours. Architecture, perhaps, is the clearest illustration. The greatest buildings since Greek days, the cathedrals of the Middle Ages, were built, it would seem, without any regard to their situation, placed haphazard wherever it was convenient. Almost invariably, a cathedral stands low down in the midst of a huddle of little houses, often as old or older, where it is marked by its incongruity with the surroundings. The situation of the building did not enter into the architect's plans. They were concerned only with the cathedral itself. The idea never occurred to them to think of it in relation to what was around it. It was not part of a whole to them. It was the whole. But to the Greek architect, the setting of his temple was all important. He planned it, seeing it in clear outline against sea or sky, determining its size by its situation on plain hilltop or the wide plateau of an acropolis. It dominated the scene. Indeed, it became, through his genius, the most important feature in it, but it was always a part of it. He did not think of it in and of its for itself as just the building he was making. He conceived of it in relation to the hills and the seas and the arc of the sky. To see anything in relation to other things is to see it simplified. A house is a very complicated matter, considered by itself, plan, decoration, furnishings, each room indeed, made up of many things, but if it is considered as part of a block or part of a city, the details sink out of sight. Just as a city in itself is a mass of complexity, but is reduced to a few essentials when it is thought of as belonging to a country, the earth shows an infinite diversity, but in relation to the universe it is a sphere swinging in space, nothing more. So the Greek temple, conceived of as a part of its setting, was simplified. The simplest of all the Greek buildings of the world, and the Gothic cathedral, seen as complete, a whole in itself, unrelated to anything beyond itself, was, of all buildings, the most elaborated in detail. This necessity of the Greek mind to see everything in relation to a whole made the Greek drama what it is, just as it made the Greek temple. The characters in a Greek play are not like the characters in any other drama. The Greek tragedian's way of drawing a human being belongs to them alone of all playwrights. They saw people simplified because, just as in the case of their temples, they saw them as part of a whole. As they looked at human life, the protagonist was not human. The chief role was played by that which underlies the riddle of the world, that necessity which brings us here and takes us hence, which gives good to one and evil to another, which visits the sins of the fathers upon the children and sweeps away innocent and guilty in fire and pestilence and earthquake shock. Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, Why hast thou? Maybe thus, hath not the potter power over the clay to make one vessel unto honor and another unto dishonor. To St. Paul, the puzzle was easy to solve. To the Greek tragedians, it was the enigma, never to be answered, and they thought of human beings first and foremost in relation to that mystery. So placed against the background of infinity, part of the immeasurable whole, human complexities are simplified. The accidental and the trivial, from that point of view of the whole, drop out of sight, as in a wide landscape, figures can be seen only in outline, are as the innumerable lines one of Rembrandt's old women's faces would disappear if she were placed in a spacious setting. Now, one of the things that we might look at, though, is speculating about religion. Is like, why do that, right? And why speculate about God? If there's revelation or inspiration, then whatever. So it's saying their grasp of philosophy or their directions of philosophy were not in the same directions. Because weren't there Greek stories that indicated that, they had ideas of why what they called the gods and goddesses did things? For us, it is the other way about. Each human being feels an entire canvas. We have dismissed from our scheme of things fate that spins the thread and cuts it. Human nature is the great enigma to us. The mystery of life is the mystery of a man's own self, and the conflict we care about goes on within. A man's life is seen not as what is done to him, but as what he does to himself. The fault, not in our stars, but in ourselves. Well, belief in fate doesn't mean that you don't believe people have choices to do with their opportunities set before them. And there is a stage where each one of us is the only actor. We differ from the Greeks in nothing so much as in the way we look at the individual, isolated, in and for himself. Our drama, all our art, is the very reversal of simplified. It is a work of most subtle individualization, but to the Greek, human beings were not chiefly different, but chiefly alike. The Greek dramatists, placing their characters on the tremendous stage, whose drama is the conflict between man and the power that shapes him, man created sick, commanded to be whole, saw as important in them only the dominant traits, the great emotions, the terrors and desires, and sorrows and hatreds that belong to all mankind and to all generations and make the unchanging pattern of human life. Well, Islam and the nature-affirming religions would say that we're born right, and some people just end up corrupting things, right? Their beliefs and their actions end up being corrupt in one degree or another, and we're supposed to try to maintain our wholeness, our nature that we were upon. So it's, again, a different approach, right? Put any character from a Greek tragedy beside one of Shakespeare's, and the difference that results from the different points of view is clearly to be seen. One is simple and uncomplicated, the other complex and contradictory too. An obvious comparison is that between the Clytemnestra of Aeschylus and Lady Macbeth. The two outstanding examples, a splendid evil embodied in a woman. The greatest poet of classic times drew the one, the greatest poet of modern times the other. The two characters point the way their creators looked at the world of men. Clytemnestra in the Greek play is magnificent from beginning to end. When she enters, we have been prepared for her hatred of her husband and her determination to kill him as soon as he comes back from Troy. We have heard, most pitifully told, the tale of how 10 years before her young daughter was killed by her own father when the gods demanded a human life to speed the ships to Troy. In Plutarch's Lives, I give the account of some human sacrifice incidents. Well, I mean, I'm reading the translation of Plutarch's Lives, and and some of the Greek stuff. No, I mean, some of the Celtic stuff talks about that too. Some of the Hindu stuff talks about that too. And just because we talk about human sacrifice on this channel doesn't mean we're promoting that sort of thing. Just presenting what the myths say. There is one sentence in her first speech which hints at what she has felt, even though the victors wend their way securely home. What those dead suffered, yet may work them ill, that pain which never sleeps. It has never slept for her throughout the years, that pain which one dead girl suffered. So much to win our sympathy the poet allows himself, but in all that follows he draws boldly in clear firm outline the picture of a strong woman without a single weakness, calm and proud and sure of herself, scornful of opposition, never doubting that what she determines she can carry through alone, with the help from no one. So does she do. She murders her husband, and coming out through the palace doors, she proclaims her deed. Lies, endless lies, I spoke to serve my purpose. Now I gainsay them all and feel no shame. Long years ago I planned. Now it is done. Old hatred ended. It was slow in coming, but it came. I stand here where I struck, so did I. Nothing do I deny. I flung around him a cloak full folds, deadly folds. I caught him, fish in a net, no way to fly or fight. Twice did I strike him, and he cried out twice, and his limbs failed him, and he fell. Then I gave him the third stroke. So there he lay, and as he gasped, his blood spouted and splashed me with black spray. The dew of death, sweet to me as heaven's sweet raindrops. When the cornland buds, oh, if such a thing might be, over the dead to pour thank offerings. Over this dead it would be meat and more, who caring not as a beast should die, when flocks are plenty in the fleecy folds, slew his own daughter, dearest anguish born by me in travail, slew her for a charm against Thracian winds. Chorus. Loud words of boasting, and the man your husband, Clytemnestra. Call me to trial, like any silly woman, curse me or bless, all one to me. Look, this is Agamemnon, my husband dead, struck down by my right hand, a righteous workman. So the matter stands. Here lies the man who scorned me, his wife, the fool and tool of every shameless woman, beneath Troy's walls. Her last words, addressed to her lover, angered at the people's outcry, and the last words of the play, i.e. of the Agamemnon, which is the first of the trilogy dealing with all that happened after Agamemnon's return to Orestes' final acquittal for his mother's death, are, dogs will bark. Who cares to listen? What avails this empty talk? You and I are lords here. We two now will order all things well. Lady Macbeth is a second Clytemnestra through the earlier acts, as sure of her purpose, as resolute, as untroubled by a doubt. When Macbeth wavers, she has strength enough to make him strong. Would he, she asks him, by failing to carry through his determination, live a coward in his own esteem? The words have the very ring of Clytemnestra's. So too, in her great speech, she is one with the Grecian queen, exulting in the stains upon her from her husband's blood. I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums, and dashed the brains out, had I sworn as you have done to this. When Duncan is dead and Macbeth comes to her with the daggers that should have been left by the attendants as proof they were guilty, she bids him carry them back and smear the men with blood, and to his horrid refusal, I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on't again, I dare not, she answers scornfully. Infirm of purpose, give me the daggers, the sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. Even so would Clytemnestra have spoken and have done. The portrait of Lady Macbeth is drawn up to her last appearance as simply in as clear outline as Aeschylus could have done it, with only one slight and yet significant exception. While she is waiting for Macbeth to kill the king, and fearing that his purpose will not hold, she speaks to herself. Had he, i.e. the king, not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. That sentence blurs the clear outline. Clytemnestra have a moment of anguish, a sharp memory to stab her, when her husband rose from the bath for her to throw the cloak around him. Be sure if she had, Aeschylus would never have put it in his picture. Clytemnestra's inmost personal life was not his concern. To him, her significance, her importance, lay in what was clear for all to see, outstanding, uncomplicated, a great and powerful nature brought to ruin by hatred within her. She could not resist because it was the instrument of fate. When death, at her own son's hand, came upon her, she met it as unflinchingly as she had dealt it. Lady Macbeth at the end, broken, pitiful, forever washing the hands which all the perfumes of Araby will never sweeten, shows a contradiction completely foreign to the Greek stage. She is the victim of her own most individual reaction to the murder she had planned and desired above all things. Her tragedy is within. Shakespeare was looking at what was deepest and what was loneliest in her. Now, I have seen in people what their murders and other super serious crimes have done to themselves. And I'm not talking about so-called prison justice or whatever. I'm talking about their own reaction to what they have done. And it seems that they have victimized themselves more than those they victimized. But that doesn't mean, of course, I don't believe in that those people should not receive the death penalty, because I do think that would have been the right approach. I mean, but just like how this is dealt with, right, is that the thing is the state should do it, because when individuals do it, then it's a part of a cycle, and then someone's like, oh, well, you killed my father, even so I'm gonna, but your father killed your sister, before you were around, right? Or whenever the placement was, Clytemnestra's tragedy was without. Her adversary was fate. Aeschylus, like the Greek architect building his temple, was not looking at her alone. He did not see her isolated with her fate in her own hands, or rather within her own self, as Shakespeare saw Lady Macbeth. He had in view, much less besides, he saw her against the background of the past, terrible deeds of old that must work out an evil for her and hers. The thread of her web of a life, spun far back in dim years of old, she herself, for all her great spirit, doomed before ever she began. Crime upon crime through the generations behind her. The Trojan War, brought about by her sister, because of it her daughter made to die, and she killing her husband, killed in turn by her son. That is life, said the Greek tragedian, human beings, each weaving a bit of the web of sorrow and sin and suffering, and the pattern made by a power before which the heart stands still. Against that background, an individual vagary or inconsistency does not stand out. Only a clear outline can be discerned, simplified down to the dominating, the essential, that which past all question stamps a man for what he is. Hecuba in Euripides' Trojan Women is in all outside circumstances compared to Lear. She is too old and royal and most miserable. She too is old and royal and most miserable. She was Queen of Troy. Now Troy has fallen. Husband, sons are dead. She and her daughters wait beside the ruined walls while the Greek princes draw lots for them. Hecuba's opening speech shows her complete. All the rest of the drama only confirms that first impression of a woman able to suffer to the uttermost in misery and helpless old age, unbroken. When the play begins, she wakes from her bed on the ground and speaks. Up from the earth a weary head. This is not Troy about above, Not Troy, nor we the lords thereof. Thou breaking neck be strengthened, endure and chafe not. Who am I that I sit here at a Greek king's door? Yea, in the dust of it, a woman that hath no home, weeping alone for her dead. All kings we were, and I must wed a king, and sons I brought. My lord king, many sons, all are gone, and no hope left that I shall look upon. Their faces any more are they on mine, and now my feet tread on the utmost line, an old slave woman. The Greek herald tells her one of her daughters has been sacrificed on Achilles' tomb. The Greek soldiers carry off her other daughters, one by one. They cry to her, Mother, seest then what things are here? She answers, I see God's hand that buildeth a great crown for littleness, and hath cast the mighty down. The last to go, Andromache, her son Hector's wife, she counsels, Lo yonder ships. I ne'er set foot on one, but tales and pictures tell, when over them too strong breaks the overwhelming sea. Lo then, I'll cease and yield them up as broken men to fate and the wild waters. Even so I in my many sorrows bear me low, nor curse nor strive, that other things may be. The great wave rolled from God hath conquered me. Thou let Hector and the fate that fell on Hector sleep. Weep for him e'er so well. Thy weeping shall not wake him. Honor thou the master that is set above thee now, and make of thine own gentle piety a prize to lure his heart, such as Hecuba, from first to last, placed by the mysterious workings of fate, through no fault of her own, upon the height of misery, and able to remain there outside, a pitiful old woman, but within no variableness nor shadow of turning, raised above human weakness, even though completely human in her power to suffer. The contrast Lear shows is obvious the moment one thinks of him, his passionate temper, his unreasoning folly that brought him to such a pass. The Trojan War and all that followed it could do no worse to Hecuba as Goneril and Regan carelessly comment to each other. 'Tis the infirmity of his age, yet he hath ever but slenderly known himself. The best and soundest of his time hath been but rash, yet so lovable, a high and careless spirit, slow to mark a slight. Knight, to my judgment, your highness is not entertained with that ceremonious affection as you were wont. For my duty cannot be silent when I think your highness wrong. Lear, I have perceived a most faint neglect of late, which I rather blamed as mine own jealous courtesy than as a very pretence and purpose of unkindness. I will look further into it, but where's my fool? All the little touches that bring him near us, his struggle to control his rage when terror is at his heart. Lear, deny to speak with me. They are sick, they are weary. Fetch me a better answer. Gloucester, my dear lord, you know the fiery quality of the Duke. Lear, the king would speak with Cornwall. The dear father would with his daughter speak, commands her service. Are they informed of this, my breath and blood? The fiery Duke? Tell the hot Duke that, no, but not yet. Maybe he is not well. Then most endearing, most moving of all, his weakness. Know, you unnatural hags, I will have such revenges on you both, that all the world shall, I will do such things. What they are, yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the earth. You think I'll weep. No, I'll not weep. I have full cause of weeping. toward the end those most piteous words that strip him bare. I am a very foolish, fond old man, 80 and upward, not an hour more nor less, and to deal plainly, I fear I am not in my perfect mind. So just as Clytemnestra and Lady Macbeth, the old queen and the old king, stand over against each other, she, the victim of fate, he, of his own self, her character given broadly without details simplified down to the dominant, his individual composition like no one else's. Given to us, unanalyzed, Lear has the whole stage to himself, Hecuba only a part. We have no need to question what she stands for. We look past her pain and her ruin, point us to that which no one ever shall understand, what Ajax saw when he was driven innocent to death. All strangest things the multitudinous years bring forth, and shadow from us all we know, falter alike, great oath, and steeled resolve, and none shall say of aught, this cannot be. A Greek temple makes the spectator aware of the wideness and the wonder of the sea and sky and mountain range as he could not be if that shining marvel of white stone were not there in sharp relief against them, and in the same way a Greek tragedy brings before us the strangeness that surrounds us. The dark unknown of our life is bounded by, through the suffering of a great soul given to us so simply and so powerfully. We know in it all human anguish and the mystery of pain. Well, the misery, pain too, right? But simplicity of characterization is not the same thing as lack of characterization. It is true, in fact, that characters simply drawn are almost never distinctly individualized. But Greek tragedy is the great example of how it can be done. The personages of a Greek play are clearly characterized. Hecuba is not, in any respect, one with Clytemnestra. Each of them has her own way of meeting the determined things of destiny, shift about the scene for them, and Hecuba would never have avenged her daughter's death upon her husband. With Clytemnestra in Hecuba's place, the Greek soldiers would have found their task less easy. Their portraits have been simplified, much is omitted from them, but all is there that is necessary to make each live, her own self and no one's copy. An artist can make an outline of a face which shows the individual as unmistakably as a minutely detailed portrait could, and in the same way, the Greek tragedian, while simplifying, could individualize. The point is one that must be stressed because it is generally held that the personages of the Greek drama were not people at all, but only types, abstractions of humanity. This is not true in fact, and it could not be true in theory. As regards the fact, an example of individualization more easily perceived than either Hecuba or Clytemnestra is Electra, as each of the three tragedians saw her. They all left dramas in which she is a chief figure, and they all conceived her in a completely different way. She is Clytemnestra's daughter, who has continued to live on in the palace after her father's death, with one hope only, that her brother, Orestes, will come back from exile and avenge the murder. All three plays open when Orestes returns to find her living in utter wretchedness, refusing to make terms with her father's murderers, and insulted and ill-treated by them. In Aeschylus's play, when she enters, she is carrying offerings to her father's grave, sent by her mother, who is terrified because of a dream. Her first words, addressed to the chorus, slave women of the household, and devoted to her, show her troubled and uncertain. Women who order well, all in our house, be my advisers. These offerings of sorrow, while I pour them upon the grave, tell me the words to say. What can I speak of good? How voice my prayer? Say that I bring this from a loving wife to a loved husband, sent by my own mother. Not that I have not courage. What then? Speak shall I in shame and silence, as he died. Pour out the offering for the earth to drink. The chorus, bid her pray for one to come who shall take life for life. But she shrinks back. Can it be righteous for me to make prayer to God for such a gift? Assured by them it is her very duty, she prays. But in veiled words, she cannot ask for her brother to come and take vengeance upon her mother. My father, pity me and dear Orestes. I pray, may he come home with happy fortune, and I, grant that I may be more pure of heart, more innocent of hand than she, my mother. For your enemies, my father, may retribution come, the slayers slain. That is the utmost she can say, no passionate reproaches against her mother, no crying out for revenge. She is not passionate, but very quiet, self-contained in all her sorrow, and yet when Orestes appears and she knows him, she is eagerly, warmly loving. She calls him, my joy, my four loves, father, mother, sister, so piteously killed, my brother, trusted, reverenced, you are them all to me. And in the dialogue that follows, when the chorus cry exultantly that they will shout in triumph when the murderers are killed, and Orestes says, let me but take her life, then let me die. She wishes only that her father's murderers had been slain in some far-off land. Her final prayer is that no mortal hand but Zeus himself would bring down justice on the murderers. So she passes from the scene from first to last. She never speaks of her brother's killing her mother, and she has no share in the deed, as Aeschylus has drawn her. She could not have. Completely different is Sophocles' Electra. She is burning with resentment for every wrong that she has ever suffered. She tells the chorus that she lives like a servant in her father's halls, clad in mean clothing, eating a slave's food, taunted and insulted by that woman, her mother, and that abject dastard, Aegisthus, her mother's lover. When her sister tells her they have decided to imprison her in a dungeon as soon as he returns from his journey, she cries, if that be all, then may he come with speed, that I may be removed far from you, every one. To her mother, who reproaches her for perpetually insulting her, and thinking only of her father, never of her sister, whom her father killed, she retorts, call me disloyal, insolent, outrageous, if I am so accomplished. Then be sure I am your very child. There's a lot of literal stories in history where women waited years to get revenge for the highest of crimes and was successful to some degree or another getting the revenge. And by one degree or another, I mean if you get caught and punished for life upon life, it's not complete success, But now and again, there is something pitiful in her. At the beginning of the play, she prays, send me my brother, for I have no more the strength to bear alone my load of grief. To the chorus, who reproach her gently for her sullen soul, that must forever be breeding conflicts, she answered, I know my passion, it escapes me not. I am ashamed before your chiding. And when Orestes, arriving, speaks kindly to her before they recognize each other, she says, know this, you are the first to pity me. But when he goes within to kill their mother, and a shriek is heard, oh, I am struck down smitten. She cries to him, smite if you can once more. And he comes out from the murder. She greets him exultantly. The guilty now is dead, dead. At the end, when her mother's lover pleads for his life, she bids her brother, no, slay him and forthwith, and cast him dead, far from our sight, to dogs, to birds, prey. They are her last words. Euripides' Electra is unlike both of the others. In his play, she has been married to a peasant so that her children might never have power to work harm to Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. Her first words are addressed to him as she comes out from their hut. Tenderness and gratitude are in them. O friend, my friend, as God might be my friend, thou only hast not trampled on my tears. Life scarce can be so hard mid many fears, and many shames when mortal heart can find somewhere one healing touch as my sick mind finds thee. He bids her gently not to work so hard for him. So soft thy nurture was, but she answers as a generous nature would. Not pour my strength out in the toiling fellowship. Thou hast enough with fields and kine to keep. 'Tis mine to make all bright within the door. But when he departs, she speaks to herself what she really feels. Onward, O laboring tread, as on move the years. Onward, amid thy tears. Oh, happier, dead. Let me remember, I am she, Agamemnon's child, and the mother of me, Clytemnestra, the evil queen, my name Electra. God protect my shame. Oh, toil, toil is a weary thing, and life is heavy. She cannot endure the peasant's life, a squalor and unending work. She who was once a princess, when Orestes comes and tells her at first that her brother has sent him to find out how matters are, she speaks with fierce passion. If he will but come back, she will stand with him and kill her mother. Yea, with the selfsame axe that slew my father. Let me shed my mother's blood, and I die happy. Again, it's not like, it's over nothing that he was killed or whatever. And then she pours out all her misery and her humiliation and her hatred. Tell him this grime and reek of toil that choke my breathing, this low roof that bows my head. After a king's this raiment, thread by thread, 'tis I must weave it or go bare. And she, the spoils of Troy, gleam round her throne, and by each hand, queens of the east, my father's prisoners, stand. A cloud of orient webs and tangling gold, and there upon the floor, the blood the old. Black blood, yet crawls and cankers like a rot in the stone. When Orestes has revealed himself to her, she is passionate with him to kill their mother and never spare. He sees Clytemnestra coming from afar, and memory stirs in him. My mother comes, my mother, my own that bare me. But she is exalted, straight into the snare. Ay, there she comes. And then that ever-present wrong of her rough clothing that she loathes, and her mother's soft eastern gold-embroidered stuffs, stings her again, she says. All in her brave array, Orestes is thinking only of one thing. What would we with our mother? Didst thou say kill her? Electra. What? Pity? Is it pity? Orestes. She gave me suck. How can I strike her? Electra. Strike her as she struck our father. When her mother arrives, she goes with her into the house so that she can help in the murder, with never a hesitation, never a thought to hold her back. But after it is done, and brother and sister re-enter, all her passion has gone. She is horror-struck, but her thought is for Orestes, not herself. She wants to take all the guilt and spare him, warm and generous as in the first scene with the peasant. Brother, mine is the blame, and I was the child at her knee. Mother, I named her name. What clime shall hold my evil, a roof it above? I cried in my heart for love. What love shall kiss my brow, nor blench at the brand stamped there? Orestes cries that the deed was his. I lifted over mine eyes, my mantle blinded I smote, as one smiteth a sacrifice, and the sword found her throat. But she will have it, the guilt is hers, who planned and urged him on. I gave thee the sign, and the word, I touched with mine hands the sword. Then she kneels to cover the body, her that I loved of yore, her that I hated sore. Her last words except at the end to bid her brothers farewell. The three women have nothing in common but their situation. Aeschylus's Electra is gentle and loving and dutiful, driven on against her own nature by the duty so all-important in antiquity to exact vengeance for a father's death, but not only the completely incapable herself of carrying it out, not even equal to facing her brothers doing so to Sophocles. She is an embittered, stern, strong woman who lives for one thing only, vengeance, completely brave, never stooping to submit to those who have absolute power over her, resolved, if Orestes does not return, to try to kill her father's murderers, herself, or die, knowing no least hesitation before killing her mother, our shadow of regret when she is dead, and yet touched here and there with something of pathos. I'm going to repeat that line because I'm not sure if it paused for something that came up on the phone. Completely brave, never stopping to submit to those who have absolute power over her, resolved if Orestes does not return, to try and kill her father's murderers, herself, or die, knowing no least hesitation before killing her mother, or shadow of regret when she is dead, and yet touched here and there with something of pathos. Euripides' picture is by far the most carefully studied. He too draws an embittered woman, but one in whom the lesser insults rankle, as much as the great wrongs done her. She hates her poverty and her grimy hut and her poor clothes, along with her father's murderers. She is as determined as Sophocles' heroine that her mother shall be killed. Indeed, she helps in the murder, as Sophocles does not have her do. But the moment the deed is done, she turns upon herself with a passion of loathing and remorse, and at the end, covering her mother's body, she remembers that she loved her. Each of the three is an individual woman, different from the other two, but all are drawn with complete clarity. There is nothing complicated in them, nothing to be doubtfully analyzed. There they stand, unmistakably outlined, each herself a person greatly suffering and able to exalt us by the passion of her pain, but simple, direct, easy to understand, an example of the plain reporting of the significant. Our attention is to be directed elsewhere to matters of a wider scope than the inner conflicts of a complex nature. If types were what the Greek drama had centered in, bloodless representatives of humanity, and all three Electras were essentially the same. A woman, any woman, possessed by the spirit of vengeance, the plays so written would not have been tragedies. The idea of the type is as indefensible, theoretically, as it is false, actually. A tragedy cannot take place around a type. There is no such thing as typical suffering except in the mind, a pallid image of the philosopher's making, not the artist's. Pain is the most individualizing thing on earth. It is true that it is the great common bond as well, but that realization comes only when it is over. To suffer is to be alone. To watch another suffer is to know the barrier that shuts each of us away by himself. Only individuals can suffer, and only individuals have a place in tragedy. The personages of the Greek drama show first and foremost what suffering is in a great soul, and therefore they move us to pity and awe. Emotions are not aroused by an abstraction of the mind, but Hecuba is forever something to us, to stir the feelings and quicken the spirit. Tragedy belongs to the domain of poetry, which has nothing to do with the type. The type belongs to comedy, intellectual comedy, the comedy of wit and satire. According as an art is strongly intellectual or not, the balance is tipped toward the type or toward the individual. In modern days, the art, which is inclined toward the typical, which is centered in what the mind and the eye perceive, is best exemplified by the French. The individualizing tendency, the preoccupation with the deep and lonely life of each human being, marks the English. The French are interested in what things are, the English in what things mean. They are the great poets of the modern world, as the French are great intellectualists. In a Molière comedy, the central character is a type, only slightly individualized. Tartuffe is not a hypocrite. He is the hypocrite. His creator has not only depicted his hypocrisy with such complete fidelity that the vice is stamped clearly forevermore, but he has at the same time so heightened it. L'exagération juste is the French phrase that I'm not sure that I pronounced it right, that hypocrisy is embodied in Tartuffe. He is a great artistic creation. He is not a living human being. Like all Moliere's characters, he moves on the stage, not in real life. Moliere is called by common consent a great comic poet, but he has nothing of the poet in him unless the word is used to cover all creative genius. His comedy of wit, irony, and satire is the creation of the crystal clear intellect, the farthest removed from that which belies the lunatic, the lover, and the poet. But to Shakespeare, the poet, types meant nothing at all. His characters are people in real life, never thought of as personages of the stage. Falstaff sits at his ease in his inn. He walks the London streets. Always he moves against the background of life. It is inconceivable that he should be placed forever on the theater boards. Is it a stage wood and moonlight of the electric arc that comes to mind with Bottom and his crew? The green plot is their stage, the hawthorn brake their tiring house, the chaste beams of the watery moon their light. To think of Beatrice and Benedict is to be transported to an orchard as inevitably as to think of Alceste and Salamine is to be in fancy seated before the footlights. Life is what the spirit is concerned with. The individual abstractions from life are what the mind is concerned with. The classified, the type, the Greeks were concerned with both. They wanted to know what things are and what things mean. They did not lose the individual in the type, nor the type in the individual. Tartuffe's universal truth are Falstaff's living reality. The most familiar of all the sayings that has come down to us from classic times was spoken indeed by a Roman, but it is a purely Greek conception, the basic idea of one of the greatest of Greek philosophies: I am a man, and nothing in mankind do I hold alien to me. In Greek tragedy, the figures are seen very simply from afar, parts of a whole that has no beginning and no end, and yet in some strange fashion the remoteness does not diminish their profoundly tragic and individual appeal. They suffer greatly and passionately, and therefore they are greatly, passionately alive. There is only one other masterpiece that can help us to an understanding of this method, the life of Christ. It is the supreme tragedy, but it is tragedy after the Greek model. The figure of Christ is outlined with complete simplicity, and yet by no possibility could he be thought of as a type. In a Shakespeare tragedy, the moving power is that the characters are so shown to us. We can look deep into the mystery of the human soul as we cannot even with our nearest and our dearest. And the result is that we identify ourselves with them. We ourselves become, in our degree, Hamlet or Lear. That is not the moving power of a Greek drama, nor has it anything to do with what moves us in the Gospels. The evangelists never let us know what went on within when the words they record were spoken, and the deeds they tell of done. And Peter said, Man, I know not what thou sayest. And immediately, while he yet spake, the cock crew, and the Lord turned and looked upon Peter. Our sense of the tragedy of the Gospels does not come from our identifying ourselves with Christ, nor from any sense of deep personal knowledge. He is given to us more simply drawn than any other character anywhere, and more unmistakable in his individuality than any other. He stands upon the tremendous stage of the conflict of good and evil for mankind, and we are far removed. We can only watch that agony is of another sort from ours, yet never by no other spectacle has the human heart been so moved to pity and to awe, and after some such fashion the Greek dramatists worked. It is an achievement possible only when mind and spirit are balanced. The mind simplifies, for it sees everything related, everything part of a whole, as Christ in the gospel story is the mediator between God and man. The spirit individualizes. The figure of the Son of Man so depicted that throughout the centuries a great multitude, which no man could number, have suffered with him and understood through him is the creation of the Spirit. So too the characters in Greek drama were the result of the Greek balance, individuals that showed a truth for all humanity in every human being, mankind, and a man. The Greek mind that must see a thing never in and for itself, but always connected with what was greater. And the Greek spirit that saw beauty and meaning in each separate thing made Greek tragedy as they made Greek sculpture, and Greek architecture, each an example of something completely individual at once simplified and given its significance by being always seen as connected with something universal, an expression of the Greek ideal, beauty, absolute, simple, and everlasting. The irradiation of the particular by the general. And when I say words left out, we might just be pausing for some sort of effect. But we're looking at some quotes here, so